Great, but I'm so glad someone did that. And then I found a couple of avenues. I hope to be able to upload the recording and send it out to everyone after this. So hopefully you guys should get access to it after the fact. So yes, so thanks everyone for joining, and also for the presenters, those of you willing to share what you've learned. We really appreciate that. And throughout each presentation, if you guys have questions, if you'll just drop them in the chat, and then someone from my team will moderate the question and answer section. So each presenter will talk probably about 10 or 15 minutes, and then we'll have 10 minutes for question and answers before we move to the next presenter. And then hopefully in the next week or so, I'm going to send out a survey to everyone that joined, just to find out if this was helpful, and to also see what other topics you guys would like covered in the next series. And I think that covers all of the basic stuff. And so I think we are ready for Amanda from Denver Zoo to get started.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Faliano. I am one of the animal care specialists at Denver Zoo. I have been at Denver for almost 17 years now. Can you guys see my screen? We're good? Okay. So I'm going to talk about the Przewalski horses. I know we've had a few different equids throughout this time, but we have Grevies and we have the Somalis, but I've done a lot of work with our P horses here at the zoo, so I'm going to focus on them. Maybe. All right, so just to introduce you to our wonderful herd, we started off with a family group. Our stallion came to us in 2007. We've had P horses long before then, but we're going to go ahead and focus on these guys because that's who I've worked with the most. So in 2008, Batar, which is the stallion on the right in that picture, came to us. Young little guy, about 2 years old, who was with his family beforehand and came to us and was in quarantine, broke out the window, a true stallion, came to us with our 3 mares that were very much hands-off, didn't want to be around people. They just kind of did their thing and we did our thing. And over time, we've had a change in scenery with our animals. So Mom is in the back. That's one of our original mares. And then the 2 littler ones up front with the stallion are our 2 youngsters. So we have a family herd now of 2.2. The middle guy here is castrated though. So Dad and him get along just fine. I am the stud bookkeeper for Asian Wild Horses, and I just recently became the vice coordinator as well. So here's our barn setup. They do have a pretty big yard now. We had a smaller yard, but recently got to combine 2 yards so that they have a bigger yard. The barn is just a basic, kind of almost like a shed instead of a true barn. We can lock them in if we need to. When I blew it up a little bit, I tried to put in the stalls and stuff like that because we didn't have an updated version. So you can kind of see we have 2 stalls on each barn side that we can separate them into, but that only allows for 3 areas. We have the 4 horses. So usually every day we clean with our stallion and everyone else gets divided up. The stallion loves training, so he comes in the most readily. And so it's easiest for us to get the 3 others in and we can do our training in the morning. If you look down here on the side, this is actually where our training kennel is. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor, but it's down here kind of towards the back, and it was just a chain link gate to start with. So we didn't have a lot of resources at the beginning. This wasn't an animal that was trained in the past. When I started, I was actually told they were untrainable, and that's the rest of my team joining in. So sorry guys, hang on. Okay. Sorry, I lost my train of thought, guys. So we started off with this panel, and when I was told they were untrainable, I kind of laughed. I worked with horses most of my life, and I didn't see them much different, even though they're not wild. At home, these guys, we just had to work them a little differently. So I started off at the fence. None of them were separation trained, so that became a big issue, and none of them wanted to eat from our hands. The stallion was a little bit tactile during quarantine. The vet techs did a great job of desensitizing him to human contact, so we started working with that. Here's a very quick time frame. I'm not going to read through everything since you guys will also get the slides if you're interested, but pretty much the desensitizing them to eating from our hands took the longest. That was about 6 months. Everybody was a little different. We had one mare that took even longer to even come over to us. I ended up sitting with my back towards the fence for a long time, kind of making it where it was almost negative reinforcement so that they didn't have any pressure from me, and then changing it completely to positive reinforcement training. So now the only time, I turn my back is if they try to kick at me or I walk away because I don't want to encourage that. Otherwise, they do amazing. They all love their training. So everything is food reinforcement, a little bit tactile, but that's more for the kids who liked scratches earlier on when they didn't really want food. So the stallion is my focus on this. He is the one who pushed me into really getting them trained the most. So he learned all the behaviors first, just because he was the most willing to come over before anyone else. So this is kind of a list of their behaviors that we started with. Seeing as how we couldn't access them through that chain link, obviously there was less we could do. So they learned a side, which is presenting their right side first, and then turn. I had to change the cue as our stallion had a lot of problems learning the opposite side. So I would ask him for side standing in the complete other area with the log in the place, and he just wasn't getting it. He'd present his right side. So as soon as I started using a different word, that seemed to help him. So all of the horses are now trained for a side, which is the presenting of the right, and turn, which is presenting of the left. I did use a log on the ground to help line them up, and then slowly removed it. None of them need that log anymore. They just line up on either side, depending on where we're standing and what cue we're using. They learned lift at the chain link, again, so that if they need to kick at us because they were unsure about being touched, they could and we couldn't get hurt. And I used a back scratcher to touch them at first, just so, again, my fingers stayed safe and we were able to access them. And I just bridged every time they would lift up their foot, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. And then they slowly learned what that bridge was more and more as training went on. They also learned to get up on the scale at that training panel or even along the fence line, where some of them were a little more comfortable. So some of them actually learned the scale before they learned the side or a turn. Injection was very quickly behind that, as we didn't want to dart them anymore. So a lot of them got injection trained before any of the lifts were also done. In the next few slides, I'll show you some modifications we made to that same panel. We introduced a new panel to them. We were able to start actually accessing their feet. We were able to start touching them and lifting. Step is where they actually step forward onto the block and able to access the top of their feet. And then we slowly started getting into hoof work. I'm obviously not a farrier, but I do have a big interest in their feet. So I started playing with it a little bit, and our farrier started teaching me some techniques on what I could do in between his visits. And then our mare is trained for ultrasound, but then we quickly learned that an external ultrasound, especially on these guys, is pretty much useless. So it was fun to train her and see where she was willing to go and being able to do stuff. So in the future, she's still trained for it. If we do need an ultrasound again, we can do that. She's pretty desensitized to a lot of liquids being touched. If we need to do a hot compress from a kick wound or something like that, she's by far the best. The rest are getting there, but they're not as great as she is. And even more recently, in the last few months, up to a year, we've had to change modify it again for blood draw. 3 of our 4 horses actually just got diagnosed with PPID or Cushing's. So we are modifying them or monitoring them for their PPID to make sure they're stable. So this is Batar. In 2008, after he had arrived, he had a short batch of inflamed lamina, and we were able to keep that under control, not full laminitis. But unfortunately, in 2015, he became quite a bit more lame again, and it started causing it to be a chronic lameness. And I've got a video here that was early 2016 that kind of shows how lame he really was. He really wasn't able to walk much. We ended up having to lock him in for a few weeks, which was horrible for a stallion to not be able to walk. He wasn't really interested in his girls. And this was us pretty much bribing him into that barn, finally getting him to eat, having to lock him in. We're trying to get him into that stall back there, but obviously it's very painful for him to walk. So after multiple knockdowns and immobilizations to get radiographs on him, we determined that he did have laminitis. So we put shoes on him. And this next video was the day after we put shoes on him. And this was going from a horse that wasn't able to walk to fully being able to walk. And obviously significantly better. So these were glue-on shoes that Steve, our farrier, put on in hopes that they would actually just wear themselves off. And we didn't want to introduce any metal or nails into the yard just because obviously they are wild and we didn't want them stepping on them. So after that, I got a wild hair that I needed to do more training. That was unacceptable. I was terrified every time we'd immobilize them, since P horses are batch breathers typically during immobilizations, which means they kind of stop breathing and then start and then stop. And I was done with that. So here is our panels as we modified them. The first one is, of course, that chain link fence, which we still use, and that's for horses that are new at training for those same reasons, so that they can't bite us, they can't kick at us, anything like that. And it's actually still there all the time. And then our panel actually goes in front of that. So it kind of acts as a secondary containment, and then we just push the chain link open in order to train them. So they get shifted into this pen every single day. So this is also their training area, their grain area, everything. So this is a very comfortable area for them. The first modification we made to this cattle guard, and it's just a normal cattle gate that we hung up, was to remove the bottom panel. And that was so that we could access their feet a little better. But we came into issues with babies, with kicking, with everything. So that bottom rail, as you can see in the other two pictures, is actually able to be put back. So if we have a horse that's just starting the training program, we'll put that back in. If we have a tiny baby that can crawl out, we put that back in so that we don't have, obviously, any issues. So we are able to access underneath that. At the very end of this presentation, I actually took measurements of everything in case anybody was interested, so that you know what the height is for everything. And then on the very last picture, you can see our blood draw area. The stallion was having a lot of issues trusting us because some of those bars were in the way of him being able to see the vet techs when they were doing a jugular blood draw. So we cut the pieces out, and they are also removable, and you can put them back. So usually they are only out during blood draw so that their head stays focused in on the inside and not looking around and getting distracted. But they are doing amazing. So 3 of the 4, again, are currently blood draw trained, and we can get blood on them pretty frequently. Our youngest is having a little bit issues, but he's also the youngest. So since 2016, when Batar had his laminitis, we have not had to immobilize the horses for any hoof care procedures. We've had a few issues come up, including the PPID and a fungus come through, and then floating of teeth that we have to immobilize them, but we have not done so for hooves in forever. So one of my favorite pictures is this top right one, and this is of Steve the farrier on his back having to trim Batar's feet, and that's because he was not so keen on strangers. So I worked my butt off trying to get them trained for this and didn't even think about stranger danger. So we started having people, whether it was other animal care specialists, maintenance, we had everybody we possibly could come down and do some training sessions with him and the rest of the horses to get them used to seeing other people, and that just because it's not his main caregivers, it doesn't mean that they're scary. So this was him then, and now you'll see some pictures of him doing it the normal way, or at least the way we have to kind of do it with this fence. He has had some abscesses just from normal horse wear and tear, and this is a picture of it actually starting to get cleaned out. He did become lame, so we started soaking his feet, which he hated and then loved, and then so he just stood there with his foot in a tub letting his foot soak. So that was amazing. And then every month we've been trimming their feet. So this is just kind of a picture that we had to send to our farrier just because we were so excited that we were trimming all 4 feet, and that was the result of us trimming them, just to kind of show how excited we were. This is a quick timeline I put together just to kind of show where we were and how things went to be. So it started off with Batar arriving in 2008, his first initial lamina inflammation, which was in 2009. And kind of looking back when I was going through all this, it kind of brought back to reality of the reason he might have PPID and the early signs of it. So we've been fighting this a lot longer than I could even remember, even though I've been with him most of all of his time here at Denver. Our full training plans all got into effect in 2009 is when I started it. So shortly after he came to, just normal target, bridging, everything like that. His first farrier visit through training was in 2015. So to me, it felt like forever. And it took a long time to get them comfortable with having the farrier come in and actually do some training. And then in 2016 is when that lameness started and the laminitis. And then he kept going, and now we're doing our monthly checks. So every month they do get a checkup by us, and just to see if they're long. And if they're long, we're going to go ahead and trim them. And if not, we'll give them a few more weeks. So if it's not their time, then we check them almost once a week to make sure they're not too long. And even if it's a little we trim off, that's great. We just want to keep them going so that we don't have any more foot issues. So since we are here in Denver, which is where the ZHTP course is held here in Colorado, we do get to participate in the class every time they show up. So we have at least 3 to 4 times a year the class come, and they get to show off the training, which is always awesome for me and fun for everybody involved. And this is one of the many times we do have the farriers come out, and since we aren't farriers, we still want them to get a good look at their feet to make sure that everything looks good if they need us to change everything. But this is just a few photos of how we do our training. So you can see these are both of Batar doing his front foot in a step, and then even his back foot just lifting it up for the farrier. Sometimes I still do have to help hold him because he is a spoiled boy, but for the most part, he's good with anyone touching him and working on his feet, whether it's Steve or any of the other farriers, if it's another keeper, anything like that. And so this is a fun picture of what happened earlier this year. Batar came down with a fungus that we actually had to debride. So he went under anesthesia and had to have some surgery, and he became a little untrustworthy. He didn't want any of us to get near him because we were having to give him some medications that tasted a little yucky. But after about 6 to 8 weeks, we finally got him trimmed. And so that middle picture is of the before and the after to see how much length we were able to take off, which was very, very rewarding. And we didn't have to immobilize him again just for a hoof trim, which was pretty awesome. So again, we're keeping with our trend of not having to do any immobilizations. If they do get immobilized for their teeth, we take advantage of it and do their feet, but for the most part, it's all through training. And then just to keep going, we've done some other fun stuff with the horses. So I just didn't want people to think this is only hoof care, even though this is what this webinar is about. Here's us getting blood on our young female, Subi. This was her very first blood draw, so that was pretty exciting. The others are allowed to put their head over. Subi just decided to put her head in this time, which is perfectly fine. Batar is currently trained for radiographs so that we can monitor that laminitis to make sure it doesn't come back. So that's him stepping on a pretend radiograph plate. This is him getting acupuncture. So every other week he gets acupuncture to help get that blood flow down to those hooves to ensure we don't have another laminitis scare. He seems to enjoy it just as much as we do, having an acupuncturist come in and treat him. He will actually train for her even if he's not feeling the greatest. He'll just come over and train without getting any treats. And then we have our injection training. So this was early on with it. This is our mom horse, and we're using a pulse syringe. And you can tell there's quite a bit of force behind that pulse syringe. And she's a funny horse because she will actually lean into the pressure versus going away. So they are all hand injection trained, but they started off with this in case they moved away. So now we do just use a needle and a syringe. We don't actually have to use the pulse syringe. So that's great. We've actually decreased the amount of abscesses we've had in all of them because of that. So that is all. I've had a lot of people reach out to me about what I've done with them. So feel free to reach out again if you don't get your questions answered here. Otherwise, have at it. I do have the last slide that I'll just show you guys, but when it comes out, you guys can go back to it. But it's just of our training panel and all the dimensions it takes, just so you guys have it in case you were interested on how high I needed it for trimming feet and stuff like that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So we have a few questions. How did you deliver reinforcement? And if it is by hand, how do you mitigate biting risk?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we started through the chain link, we would actually use like carrot fries or apple fries. So I cut them into long pieces so that my hands wouldn't have to go through the mesh and get bit. Now that they're in this state, we feed them more by hand and just use the flat hand force technique. Sometimes they get a little aggressive if they're afraid of something, so we just are very aware of that. We still use bigger chunks, but the chain link actually seemed to help calm them down so that they weren't as nippy and they know to use their lips instead of their teeth.
Our next question was, how did your team train for acupuncture? And there's a few more questions that have come up related to that. What symptoms prompted you to start acupuncture, and how much improvement have you seen with that treatment?
Yeah, so the acupuncture was our head vet at the time had a friend in anesthesia school who had gone through acupuncture, and when he started getting chronically lame, we were trying to figure out everything. The first time we immobilized him, it didn't show laminitis, so we were drawing straws. Is it his back? Is it this? Is it that? And so he had our acupuncturist come in for a consult on, I looked it up, like early 2016, and she thought it was a good idea. Let's go ahead and try it. And so we started training him for it, just doing tactile everywhere. And he is very sensitive. So this is one of those funny things why he won't let us do blood is she has to buy him special needles, which are ridiculously small. And so we have a stash of Batar needles at the zoo. And then we do acupuncture on a lot of other animals around the zoo, but those ones are the smallest ones that we use for out of all the animals. And he loves it. He has shown significant progress. When we don't get to do acupuncture, you can kind of start seeing some issues. During breeding season, which is in the summer, his back gets really sensitive. So even though it has nothing to do with his feet, she still starts working on that and keeps him in top condition, even though he's no longer a true breeder. So it was really the vets all collaborating and just trying to work outside the box. We did do physical therapy, which when he was truly laminated and couldn't walk, he tolerated. But then once he started feeling good, he wanted nothing to do with it. So we could do stuff, but otherwise it was just really conditioning him to all that tactile work. He even allows for the electricity, the e-stem to go on, which is awesome. With the fungus right now going on in his body, we aren't allowed to put needles in, but he still comes over for the manual stimulation, which he likes just as much. And then because it's kind of an exciting thing, our acupuncturist will bring out friends who are vets and has a chiropractor come out. So now he gets chiropractic. He is a very well-loved, spoiled person.
That's awesome. And then we got a few questions related to the foot soak. So were the shoes put on all 4 feet or just the lame one? Is the soak just water? And what were your basic steps for getting him to soak his foot?
Yeah, so the shoes were just from the laminitis and it was on all 4. So I tried to find good videos of how he was even standing. So there's a very unique stance of a laminitic or a found grade horse. And that's what he was doing. And that's when we started getting really alarmed that he was walking really bad. So it was all 4 feet. So we did shoe all 4 feet and they just started wearing off. The last one took the longest and we tried to pull it off, but it was so on there. And we thought we were going to have to mobilize them to get them off and to trim afterwards because it had been so long. And we didn't. It just fell off on its own and we went to it. The foot soaks were kind of a crazy thing. We immobilized him for his teeth because we were starting to get concerned about like his weight and everything like that. So we immobilized him, did his teeth, and he had an abscess. So we got it kind of cleaned up, but it wasn't ready to rupture yet. We were qualified to do that, and it wasn't worth having the farrier out yet. So we were, talking to the vets, they're like, "Will he soak his foot?" And I was like, "Probably not." And so we tried, and it was warm water with Epsom salt in it. And we sat there and pretty much bribed him to come over and took a lot of people like hand feeding him and then asking him to step just like he would on the stand. And I put his foot in the water, and of course he said no, and then tried it again. And once he felt the warmth on the water, like that was the huge thing. It felt so good that he just stood there. So then he ended up doing it himself. So it only took one session, and it wasn't trained before. It was, your foot hurts, this is going to help, let me try it. So it was a lot of the training leading up to it that helped. I loved the idea I saw on Wednesday. I wrote it down, of that wet mat thing that I really want to try, because more for me than for them, because sometimes their feet get so hard that it's really hard to trim. And so I would love that idea too, to try to get them on that bovine wet mat. But I think it'd be the same idea, just getting them used to stepping on different things, and the moisture is a big thing.
Awesome. That's all great information. We have just a few minutes for one more question. How much food are you using for a training session, and what are your main reinforcers?
Ooh, I feel like my nutritionist is on here asking me this, because he asks me all the time. So main reinforcements is some of his grain. He does like mega herbivore, which is a big part of it. Otherwise, carrots and apples. And we try to limit it because of his PPID, but that doesn't always happen. It depends on what we're doing. A lot of tactile reinforcement is also good for him. So sometimes he'll take lettuce, not usually. So it's carrots, apples, what we like to call Captain Crunch, which is one of those delicious apple and oats biscuits, are the top reinforcement. But usually one apple, one carrot, a head of lettuce, and about a cup of grain will last for an entire, be able to trim all 4 of his hooves. We don't do that every day, obviously, so that's a big treat. And then even for acupuncture, we can use more of his grain just because he likes it and just stands there for it anyways. We just reinforce him kind of as needed if she's doing something a little different or hard spots.
We have a few more questions, but I think we're getting close to the next presentation time. So if we didn't get to your question, we have those noted down, and we will get that to Amanda and get those answers back out.
Well, thank you.
Great, thank you, Amanda. So now we are ready for Isara from Hogel Zoo.
Yes, let's see. All right, can you guys see that okay?
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay. So I will be talking about free contact training, voluntary hoof trims on our Hartman zebras. We have 5.4 zebras right now. And I've been a keeper for almost 9 years, all here at Hogel and all in the all 9 years at the Africa section. Let's see. So I'll talk about why we decided to start training free contact, where we began, tools I like to use and recommend, and how we document our trims, and a little bit about protocols. So we started training for hoof care in our squeeze, which is also how we shift out to the exhibit each day. So they're pretty comfortable being in there, just not for long periods of time. Since they're on their way out, they get a little bit antsy to just get out, depending on the individual. As you can see, the panels are square windows and the frame is thick metal. The squeeze panels are 24 inches by 24. And the panels at the stalls are a little bit smaller at 17 by 18. The setup, it just proved to us to be inefficient since the trimmer doesn't have a good view of the bottom of the hoof, which is very important to look at when you're trimming so that you know what you need to trim. And we felt it was also a little unsafe for the trimmer if the animal suddenly moves or kicks with our arms and hands being in there, especially in the squeeze. So we proposed doing free contact and it was approved. When we first started doing free contact, we would crack a stall to pour their grain in or some hay into the feeder that was hanging near the door. Then slowly we started stepping into the stall more and more to get the zebra comfortable with us being in their space. And eventually we moved their feeders farther away so we could walk across the stall to feed them, and the zebras would just follow us. Even though they were used to being touched through the training panels or in the squeeze, touching without a barrier between us was new to them. So we began slowly. Some did great right away and others needed a little more time. We touched them while they ate their grain, which is wild herbivore, and also without food. They really liked pets and scratches. So tactile is another reinforcer they really enjoy. Once we established that trust without a barrier, we started training for hoof care using their preferred reinforcer, which is their grain. But we also use apple, pear, carrot, and sweet potato. And then of course, bridging. I like to train solo most of the time to a certain point before I introduce a second trainer, but foals do very well with 2 trainers right away. And it's very important for us to start training our foals as soon as possible. As you can see, this first picture is Missy, one of our keepers, when we first started, and one of our mares right now, when she was a foal, and she's reaching in through the training panels at the stall. So this is just protected contact, just reaching in. And her mom, this mare, is very calm when it comes to us being around her foals. And this middle picture is actually this foal grown up, and this is a little more recent. And then this is a different foal in the third picture. So most individuals show a good side and a bad side when it comes to training legs, which means just one side is going to take longer to establish because they prefer to balance on one side more than the other. And I did some trimming today, and yes, I was able to do a little more work on their good side because they prefer to balance on the other side. But at first, hind legs scared me a little bit because I had seen how hard they can kick, but it turned out that hind feet are easier to train than the fronts. And a foal's hind feet can easily be picked up, but their fronts will also take a little longer because they have to learn to balance. And zebras, our zebras at least, prefer to have both front feet on the ground. This first picture is our old stallion, and I'm just doing some touch decent going down the legs. And this is Poppy, one of our current mares, when she was just 2 years old. And when we first started picking up her legs, as you can see, I have a trainer feeding her, but I also have treats with me just in case. And I am keeping a little bit more distance. I'm down lower, just picking up her legs. And here is Poppy. She's been my biggest case. Poppy, I have to trim her regularly because all her hoofs grow fast and sometimes they grow a little bit wonky, but her training really increased when she came up lame on her hind right, and that hoof grew really long. So I focused the majority of her training on that specific hoof. And since I didn't want to have to immobilize her, I just skipped the hoof stand or block and trimmed her on my boot as well as just one-handed. She's a skittish zebra, so today I still trim all her hoofs without a stand because that's just another terrifying object that would take a long time to desensitize her to. It's one of my goals, though, to be able to use a hoof stand or a block now that I've seen a couple that I liked in the other presentations. But you can see I first started placing her hoof on my boot just to see how she would do, placing it just a little bit higher off the ground and on a different object. And she did really well. And I reached out to the ZHTP trimmers for advice, and Andrea just said, well, if she's that comfortable with it on your boot, you could probably just trim her like that. So I did, and that's still how I do a lot of it. And you can see me picking it up also off my boot and using a knife on her. And there is another trainer holding her with food. And you can see a bit before and an after picture here. And then here's a short video of what it looks like. I like to touch her side and move back to the hip and go down the leg, just so she knows I'm there and what I'm doing. And it allows me to get a feel also for how calm she is. So here we have our stallion, Scooby. He's an amazing zebra with a beautiful temperament. He is calm and curious and does really well with most new things introduced to him. He's very comfortable with his feet being picked up, that he knows when I get into position, he picks up his feet even before I ask or before I touch him. We like to use him to train new keepers when they first start out doing free contact, just because he's so calm. And there I'm just training by myself using, I'm just putting some of his treats on the floor, and I was able to pick out all his hoofs, and that was more towards the beginning of his training. And then this middle picture is me cleaning out all his hoofs, and I don't have a second trainer and I don't have any food on me, so I'm just using tactile as a reinforcement. And then we had our farrier Steve visit, and he was able to go all the way around and just do all his hoofs while I just held him with some of his produce. Sometimes I need both hands, and Scooby is a really calm zebra, so I can hold his front hoofs on the inside of my leg sometimes. I just need to make sure that I stay under him as much as I can and not pulling his leg out. He's a small guy, so it helps that I'm also short so that I can do this. And this video was just, we just did this yesterday. So I'm just rasping here. Scooby came to us from Disney back in 2019, and he used to have white line disease and just a lot of hoof issues in Florida with all the moisture. And he came to us freshly trimmed and resected. And here we have not had to do a whole lot with him. His hoofs just grew. He just maintains them really well because we're so dry here, and that all he really ever needs is his front heels trimmed and maintained a little bit. But other than that, we don't have to do a whole lot with him. So here's one of our foals, Zion. We take every opportunity to work on desensitization. It always depends on the foal's level of curiosity and the mare's temperament. The mare tells us when we can start. It could be 1 week, or it could be a few months after they foal. But just because the mom gives us permission, it doesn't mean that the foal is ready. But we can start desensitizing the foal to our presence and just doing all that trust building, free contact, as well as in the squeeze, just doing some touching. And then once the foal is interested, especially once they start eating food from us, then we just try to be as consistent as possible. Here we have Zion at 3 weeks old. This is Ziba, our mare, that is just very calm with us being in her space and with her foals. And I was able to rasp his hoofs the day after that because he just did so well. And he wasn't taking treats yet, food from us, but he definitely was into all the scratches. And this is him at 3 months old. So Zion was born in January. So it meant he was in the barn a lot, especially overnight and in the morning before going out to exhibit. So he would lay down quite often, and we were able to just go in the stall while he was laying down, and he let us give him all the scratches, all the pets, but also I was able to desensitize him to having his legs and hoofs manipulated for trims, and he was awesome. And then that same visit, when Steve, our farrier, visited, he was able to pick up all his feet and do a little bit of trimming. He didn't need a whole lot, but it was still great that he was able to do that. And in this, we have, it was like a party this day. So I'm holding Zion with food while Steve works on him. And his mom was in the next stall, and she had access to us, but she stayed in the next stall with another trainer. And then Steve's assistant was the one taking pictures and video. So she was also in the stall with us. And this is another foal born this year. So this is the same mare, Zeba, and the foal is Wally or Wallace. And we have one trainer holding both Zebra's attention while I rasp his hoofs. And he was just 6 weeks old here. So earlier I said in an earlier slide, I talked about skipping the hoof stand because it's a whole other step to train. But with Scooby, I'm able to use it. I just don't usually, because he doesn't require a lot of work. He really never needs his hind hoofs maintained or his fronts. You can see in this picture is when we first got him, he still has a little bit of resection on his hoof, but I was able to present him with the block and the stand. And since he came with the hoof present behavior, he came right over and put his hoofs on the block. So then I put a stand in, and since the stand was a little bit taller than him, he needed a little bit of help to put it on there, but he was great about letting me just grab his leg and help him out and put it on there. So here's some of the tools that I use. So the hoof stand, rarely, but I'm hoping to get that trained. Right-handed or left-handed knife, make sure you get a knife that for your dominant hand, or else it's just going to be awkward. A loop knife, we don't use a loop knife very often with Hartmans because their frogs are so different. A hoof pick, a wire brush for when their hoofs are just really dirty. It just helps to clean them out a little bit better so that we're not just damaging our knives. Nippers, half rounds. I like to use half rounds to take like small bites when the hoofs are just really, really hard. And since we're so dry here in the summer, they do get really hard. A rasp, gloves to protect your knuckles. I've rasped my knuckles many times. And then also shoes to protect your feet. That has a metatarsal guard and a steel toe or composite toe. I learned that recently because Poppy spooked and she dropped her hoof to take off, but it landed on my foot. Luckily, nothing was broken. It was just a little bruise. But then after that, I was like, yeah, I need some shoes to protect my feet. So now I switch shoes every time I trim. And then after I trim, I like to log my trims. This is an Excel document that I created. It's very similar to what our zoo uses to log training and enrichment. Each animal has their own tab, a column for the date, time, the trimmer's name, what hoof was trimmed, and a comment section where I like to enter exactly what I did, what tools I used, and whether it was a complete trim or if it needs to be addressed again in the next couple of days. And I mean, you can create whatever document you want as long as you have something to refer back to. I definitely refer back to this for just to see when was the last trim or what exactly was the issue, what I took off. And it's great for new trimmers in the future to look back at. And then getting institutional support. So we submitted a proposal with a clear purpose and a view for the program. We coordinated with the appropriate people, which for us was the training and enrichment coordinator, the veterinarian, the curator, and director of animal care. Then we put our protocols together. We had them reviewed and approved by those same people. And once we started, we had a small core team of trainers, which I think it was just 2 of us to begin with, and then 3. And then now there's 2 other trimmers besides me. And then we'll incorporate other trainers as needed. I attended the Zoo Hoof Stock Trim program in January of 2019, which was the very first class the program had. And it was the best decision for my career. I highly recommend it. 2 of my colleagues have been since then. And we're going to continue to send more since our hoof stock collection is just, it keeps growing. And then other recommendations from me is just do what you can to be comfortable and confident around Equids, whether it's taking riding lessons, shadowing a horse trainer, volunteering at a farm or ranch, or riding along with a farrier. I did this and it helped me. It really boosted my confidence on being around the zebra. So I was all for doing free contact training with them, and it has been great. It really has made a difference, and it has really made my relationship with the zebras a lot better. And that is all I have.
Thank you. So we have a few questions. When someone is holding the zebra with food while they're being trimmed, is it a continuous feed?
It is a slow continuous, depending on how much training that zebra has, how established the behaviors are, then we can slow down, but it's usually a continuous.
How did you get buy-in from upper management to move from protected contact to free contact?
We just have, they're very supportive, and we were just able to show them how we work with them, how we start it. And yeah, everyone was very supportive. They were not against it at all. We changed our protocols because our protocols used to be like no free contact at all. So our protocols, the wording had to change. And then, yeah, we just had to show them that it can be done. And then they trusted us that we were making the right decision.
How do you mitigate safety risks when doing free contact?
Safety risks. So all our zebras get separated in the stalls when they're in the barn. So we just make sure that, okay, the zebra that I'm going to train is not fighting with their neighbor. And if they are, then I would separate the other one and make sure that there's an empty stall between them. And that way there's not that distraction that if they decide to fight with their neighbor, they're not going to take it out on me because I'm right there. It has happened. And then I just make sure that I have a secondary containment in the hallway, and then I can go in the stall. That way I can leave that door cracked a little bit or just ready to open, and that is my exit. So I make sure that I have exits, as well as I always let another keeper know if I'm going to be in there by myself. Then I just let another keeper know that I am going in free contact to do some training, so everyone is aware.
Do you have any mares that don't allow tactile themselves or training foals while in the same space?
We have one mare, Poppy. You saw her in the pictures and videos. She was our first foal born here, so we didn't start free contact with her right away, but she is the skittish one, and she gets it from her mom. And so she's one that is very protective in the beginning, and her foals are skittish like her. So her foals are not curious about us at all. They run away from us in the beginning until like they start to become curious and interested in some food and grain, then they become a little more curious about us. But her foals do take like several months before we can actually start working with them. So yeah, Poppy's foals, and Poppy, even though she's great, I can trim all her hooves voluntarily, free contact. Yeah, her foals definitely start training a little bit later than the other mare's foals.
And that is all the questions we have had come in. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Actually, there is one more that came in. I am so sorry.
Okay.
We do still have some time. Did you start training any individuals in adulthood or only as foals?
We started as adults. Yes, so Poppy was our very first foal, and we didn't start her until she was like about a year and a half. Yeah, because we got approved to do free contact, I believe, later in 2017. And she was born in 2017, but she was skittish and her mom was skittish. So it went very slow in the beginning, and then we started going in to feed them their grain, and that's how it started. And then I didn't take the trim class until 2019, so that's when it really took off. Even though we were already doing some tactile through the training panels, but we weren't actually like picking up legs quite yet.
And there is one more question. How many sessions per day did you aim for?
Usually it was just one session a day. Yeah, one session a day. And since we are cross-trained here, I wasn't always in the area. So it didn't happen every single day. But every time I'm in there, since it is my main area, I try to do at least one session. And all the training happens in the morning because they have to be out on exhibit by 9 o'clock. So everything happens in the morning. That's why some of my pictures, you can still see like the stall is dirty. But that's when they're all separated. So they're all calm. They're all ready for some food. And that's really when we take advantage.
I'm gonna wait a minute or two to see if there's any more questions that come in. Anybody has anything else? I had a question from one of my teammates. Are there other sections of the zoo that do free contact, or is it just your department? And then there's a question that came in the chat. Have you had any significant injuries to staff?
Any significant what? Injuries?
Yeah.
I believe, I mean, with Hoofstock, since we're the Hoofstock team, I believe we're the only section that really does it. We are going to be moving 3 male zebras to our rhino barn right now, pretty soon. So I'm assuming they're going to be doing free contact somehow at this barn too. But right now it's just my team that does the free contact. And we do wait for new keepers to start doing that. And they start slow by just getting comfortable going into the stall to feed grain and not really touching yet. And then eventually we start them off with doing a little bit of trust building and tactile while they feed their grain. And injuries, I have not had any significant injuries other than like maybe a soft kick where it just threw me off balance, but it wasn't an aggressive kick or anything. It was just, I might have just touched Poppy in the wrong spot and she just kind of like kicked out her leg and it just threw me off balance, but there was no bruise or anything. And then just the biggest one was just when she accidentally dropped her foot, her hoof on my foot. And it just left a small bruise, but it was nothing big. And yeah, doing free contact, like in the last presentation, they asked about training. So our training treats are also cut like long French fries. and they're really good about not reaching in to bite. When they do start reaching a little bit more aggressively, then that means, okay, we're going to cut it short because they're just not very calm. Or we give them a little break or reposition them and then try again. And then we can also feed them with a flat palm.
Awesome, thank you. And we did have a comment from Hogel come in. We do free contact with ostrich, warthog, markhor, growl, and giraffe as well at Hogel.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have markhor, and we do all the free contact with them. Yeah, and our ostrich, we are able to do some tactile, but yes, our area is pretty big. As well as our giraffes, we do also do free contact with giraffes.
I don't see any more questions coming in, so thank you so much.
Great, thank you so much. Next up is Kimberly from Brevard Zoo.
All right. Share our screen here. Okay, so hi, my name is Kim. I am a curator of animals here at Brevard.
And my name is Morgan, and I am an African keeper here at Brevard Zoo.
We're going to talk to you guys today about our zebra trim program. We love to talk zebras, so we hope that we can keep within this time limit. Hope we also pick some topics that we hope are helpful to everyone else. So just kind of start with the background information on us, kind of we started specifically in the zebra trim stuff. We kind of started with the giraffe hoof care program and just the giraffe care workshop, which kind of allowed us to start our own hoof trim program here. Giraffe is kind of where it started, but we knew that zebra was to be the close second for that. We had our director actually attend the zoo hoofstock trim program to kind of help really feed and guide a lot of our keepers who most of us didn't have hoof trim experience as far as like trainers go. It's kind of help guide the program and really get it all up and running. So 2019 is when we really wanted to start with our zebra hoof trim program. We knew they were a focus. They had suboptimal hoof care leading up to that. We really wanted to make sure that we tackled their care in general, and really needed to develop what our spaces look like as far as our training goes. So we never really had anything built to accommodate this. So we kind of had to use what we had already, which it sounds like a lot of the presenting facilities had to do a lot of things similar. Just to kind of introduce, oh, that went too fast.
Hey, Kim.
Our herd. Yeah.
Kim, yeah, I was just gonna let you know, sometimes your audio cuts in and out a little bit, and then it comes in and we can hear you great, but it's like when you pause for a little bit and start again. So I don't know if there's anything to do differently, but just wanted to let you know.
I have no idea. I will try to talk slower. If you hear it, just give me a heads up and I will do whatever I can.
Yeah, it broke up on that last bit there.
All right, well, I can just talk all in one long sentence too, and we'll just see if maybe that works. Okay, so our grevies that we have here, we have, our herd has grown quite a lot recently. So we kind of started our initial training program with 3 adult females. We had Zonka, Iggy, and Lauren. After we started our training program with those individuals, we ended up getting our Sally and Bakari. Then from Bakari adding our herd, each of our females had offspring. So Zonka had Zippy, Iggy had Ziggy, and Lauren had Jersey. All of which are trained for voluntary hoof trims. And we're just kind of going to go through what our general training and shooting process looks like. So as far as our initial training, we kind of had a different setup than I think most facilities had with our train of thought when we were starting our initial how we get this program going, how do we get this behavior trained. We actually started with 4 primary trainers. We found that having better overlap with weekends, vacations, anything like that, having more individuals all understand what we're doing with our training was beneficial for the overall outcome of being able to train this as consistently as we were able to. We trained each zebra kind of one by one. We would try to start and train fully before we would kind of move on to the next, allow us the opportunity to kind of learn through some mistakes, trial and errors on things, figure out what was really the best process that worked for the individuals that we had here. We went through quite a few different block developments when we were trying to figure out what worked best for us. And in the later slide, I'll show you what our blocks worked with, kind of what worked best for us in each scenario. We tried to do a minimum of 1 training set per day when we initially started training the behaviors. Sometimes we would have a breakers and we would see a lot of progress and get really excited to do maybe 2, maybe 3 training sets in a day. We were able to fit it in. We were all just really excited for the progress and wanted to try to keep that going. Us as a team, we tried to video almost every training set. We really wanted to track and celebrate and keep everyone as up to date with what criteria look like. So we videoed so much. We found it really, really helpful to increase our trainer communication, as well as making sure that our training logs were incredibly detailed. Anything we could add that would help our other trainers be able to see consistent with what our criteria look like as we train. And like I said, just a lot of trial and error. So our initial training setup was identified to be our rhino and zebra mixed species habitat. This was primarily the only habitat our zebra were initially housed in. Since then, we've gone through a whole mixed species and habitat rotation program with our zebras. So now they occupy many different spaces, but initially they were only in our rhino yard. We had our 3 females, so we could kind of keep 2 together for the most part. 1 we would be able to shift inside, and then we also had 3 rhinos occupying habitat as well. So we would take about 2 to 3 keepers to do each training set, maybe 2 trainers for zebra, another trainer holding rhino, just keeping them fed and happy. We would try to plan it kind of around lunch times to kind of allow us more opportunity to have longer time for our training sets. We also have reinforcement prepped. Our reinforcement is, we use a lot. We primarily use ADF16 grain as our training reinforcement, but we also use carrot. We use horse treats. Knicker Treats is the brand that we purchase. We use hay. We also use lettuce. A variety of different things we find that our zebra are willing to work for. We also implemented a mock shoot, like it seems like a lot of facilities have done as well. Just literally a 2x4 on the ground works perfect, allows us to get that lineup behavior a little bit more consistent and what we like to call the sleeping button. Nice and keep them as close to the fence line as we can, which allows us to get the review what that helps for our trimmers to be able to do what they need to do. We would always also try to make sure we had brief meetings before or after each training set. We would discuss what our goals were, make sure we were all on the same page with what our criteria was, what we were trying to go for. The criteria changed, we were just able to keep up with that. And at the end, just about what didn't well, maybe we need to try something else. Maybe something was successful with one trainer that wasn't necessarily successful with a different trainer at a different time. So it's nice and some little sport balls and stress. These are primarily the blocks that we use for our training. We kind of moved away from blocks for the most part. We really prefer the hoof stand. So now whenever we were trained in base from stand initially, when we first started training, we used the block. I definitely agree with some people that little lip on those block make a world of difference to help us catch that, but get that nice curled behavior to get a nice view of underneath that foot to see what that tissue is doing. So our front hoof block was designed specifically to fit under the, the bars of the habitat and also stay a little bit under the bars so that way our zebra couldn't flip them. So our block is quite long specifically for that purpose. And then our rear hoof block kind of acted as a stepping stone to our front block as well when we first started training. It's a little bit shorter, a little nicer for that rear foot to get on, but also a really nice way to approximate that hoof coming up onto a block when we first started trying to shape that behavior. As far as our front foot training goes, we really found that we needed a line up behavior just to get that correct body positioning, get them nice lined up in front of the block and in the correct stance. From there, we just started approximating them closer to the block with our target stick. Our target stick really was a good foundation for everything that we did for our hoof trim training, getting them approximated up to it. And then once they would get close to it, we would start reinforcing and bridging every time they would touch the block. If they started lifting up and over the block, and just kind of make that criteria very specific at each step of the way. Every time we would change criteria, we had to keep to it. We like to say that we found our zebra played us a lot. And if we just try to hold out for a really long time at a certain level of criteria, they knew it and they would take advantage of us and just get lots of extra treats. And we started making our criteria a lot stricter and found we made a lot more progress through that behavior. From there, just building duration on blocks. Started with that tap on the top of the block and then just holding out that duration to be a little bit longer on the block and a little bit longer on the block until we were able to meet just a continuous hold. Our behaviors were continuous, which also went to a continuous feed. Once they were on that block and kept their foot up for an extended period of time, we would introduce someone sitting down at the block who would be able to just act as that trimmer so we could train them and desense them to be comfortable with someone being down by a hoof. And then that trimmer would be there, introduce tools, and our behavior would progress from there. Short video of just kind of our initial training. This was just Zonka at the beginning with lining up to the block and just that initial tap. Or it wants to go right past it. So Zonka would be cued for her lineup behavior. We would make sure this was trained as a behavior itself. We always bridged and reinforced when we would ask for that behavior. We would ask for her foot and she would put it up. I'm not sure if you guys can hear our bridge and reinforce. We found our zebra loved verbal praise. We love the verbal praise. We give them a lot of it. We found they specifically really responded to it. So we definitely get carried away with all of the baby talk and good jobs. For our rear foot training, it was a little bit different. We found it was almost a little quicker sometimes. So we used that smaller block on the back. A lot of times when we started introducing the rear foot, which would happen after we would train the front feet, they would walk right up to that block and put that front foot on, like, yeah, we did it. And trying to retrain that a little bit to know, actually, we want you to come over it. So we would just get that block in and we would target them right over until they stepped all the way over. That initial step over the block, we tend to do a jackpot reward with just a couple treats. So that way they could understand that we wanted that from them. Once they were targeting completely over and stepping over that block, we would just try to approximate them to take small steps with that target just to get them closer and closer. And we found that a lot of times once that rear foot got to that block, once it came on, it planted a lot longer and easier than it did with the front feet. So get that foot up, get them in the right position and cue for the behavior that we were looking for and ask for that foot. And this is a video of it. It's really quick the way she pops that foot up. So I hope you guys can see that clearly. So we just kind of pulled her up. And this was the first time reinforcement was continuous during these times. So tips and tricks that we found were really helpful with the way that we trained in the setups that we have was trainer body positioning was almost everything. Our zebra really wanted to be right next to us. We found that if their body position was not correct or we needed them to adjust slightly, we would just take a small step backwards or forwards, and that made a world of difference of them just taking that small step up or small step back to allow that body position to get that stability to be able to lift that hoof up when we ask for it. Praise and bridging, we were crazy. So much praise, so much bridging. Every time that especially rasp, we find that there was a little bit more sensitivity with that. Each time that rasp would move, we were bridging each time and just offering that continuous reward. We back off bridging and praise as they get more comfortable and understand long-term what the behavior is and what we're looking for. But initially, just a lot of bridging and praise we found really beneficial for them having the confidence to get through something that might be a little bit more scary for them in that moment. Reinforcement frequency really mattered. If we started seeing a little bit of tension, maybe a little bit tail swishes with something that might be a little uncomfortable for them, we would increase that reinforcement and let them know that they're doing the right thing. We're going to work through it and hopefully kind of get past that little bit of uncomfortableness that they might be showing, which we found worked really well. And then criteria, once we met criteria, we pushed past it. We make sure that criteria is understood and not just sitting at that one spot for a long time, not making progress. Moving forward was really important in reading their behavior when they were comfortable doing that first set of criteria and then moving past it to keep making progress. Things that we kind of hit a lot at the initial part of our training, just a lot of concerns, excuses, and obstacles. This training was a lot. It was a big commitment for us as trainers, as keepers, making sure that we could all coordinate because it took so many of us and the training sets could last 30, 40 minutes, depending on how we were working and what we were doing. It all just depended. So animal labeling was a big thing when we first started. There were a lot of keepers who initially were like, well, she's too flighty. You'll never be able to train this behavior with her. Or they're too aggressive. You won't be able to make the progress. So animal labeling was something that we had to work through with not only our team, but also just the outward perspective of our animals. Safety was a big thing, making sure that everyone felt safe because we didn't have this perfect idea of a chute to be able to train these behaviors. So what can we do with what we have and how can we make it as safe as we can? Habitat rotation, once we started doing that, it was a big concern for keepers of, well, they're in this habitat and we don't have a training space in there, so we can't train them. Or they're in a mixed species area, so how do we mitigate all the other animals that want to train as well? And all the just obstacles to get through that. And then trainer consistency and time availability. How do we make time for it in the day? How do we make sure we're consistent across each other, especially with having multiple trainers? So we kind of want to dip a little bit more into these specific topics. Animal labeling, like I said, Iggy specifically was labeled as way too flighty. One of my favorite memories training her initially was we were in the middle of a training set and I watched a butterfly and Iggy saw that butterfly and booked it. She had nothing to do with that space anymore. That butterfly changed the environment too much and we were not having it. So really working through that, and we have some videos later of Iggy doing a behavior and a video at the end here to show a little bit more of her uncomfortableness with the initial part of these trainings and how we were able to grow from that. But labeling kind of made our keepers anxious. It put a lot of pressure on them. Like, well, this animal's really flighty. I'm going to have my work cut out for me. I have a harder zebra to train than somebody else. So we kind of try to stop doing a lot of the animal labeling and just kind of work through each thing as a training set. How do we work through these obstacles? How do we get through these concerns? And how do we build this individual's confidence to work with us on this really important behavior that we want to make progress with? Also just kind of understanding why that animal is being labeled. What is making them uncomfortable? Is it they want to train with another individual that makes them feel more confident, but we've shifted them away? Is it we're not using a reinforcement that is they find reinforcing enough for that? What can we do to help break down that behavior? We also found a lot of times what keepers would say is aggression meant frustration or just overmotivated. We had individuals who would get up to a block and just basically paw and kick at the block because they just wanted to do the behavior so much. They were just so motivated to do it. So maybe feeding them a little bit before the training set kind of helped settle that eagerness and allow the training set to run a little bit more smoothly. So how do we kind of go in a different direction of what we think these behaviors might mean, and how can we work through it? And for the times where maybe we were saying an animal was behaving aggressively or too flighty, can we pair them with somebody who might have worked with them a little bit longer, stronger trainer who might be able to help, kind of someone who has not as much training experience work through some of these behaviors. And we very much had all training levels. We had very experienced trainers and trainers who were not experienced at all. We found having those different levels really helped. It helped our stronger trainers learn how to mentor a little bit better, and it helped our newer mentors not only gain a better relationship with the animals, but also themselves as teammates. So this is Iggy. Initially very nervous. Small movements, you can see this target moved just a little bit too much. Once that target moves a little bit too much, Iggy is gone. So things we worked through with her. Safety was a big one as well. Some zebra can be hand-fed, other zebras were not hand-fed. This picture is Lauren. This was the first time we actually asked her to walk up to a block, and she walked right up to it and stood on it with both front feet. So how do we kind of work through some of that? Lauren is also not a zebra that we hand feed. We hand feed a lot of our other zebra, but she is very lippy when she takes food. So we train her out of just a bucket or a scoop or just a food dish and just hold it and offer that reinforcer and take that reinforcer away as we bridge if we need to. How do we create safe spaces and what we already have? So in this setup as well, initially, you can see a little mesh panel that we added just to kind of help our trimmer feel a little bit safer when we were initially going through this process, just in case. What if they bite? What if they kick? What if they do anything? How can we modify what we have with something as simple as just a mesh around a panel to help kind of work through that? We use a stall guard in another one of our areas where we open a door to allow just that safety aspect. So what can we modify to kind of risk mitigate as much as we can? It's always important to have a plan as well. And I love hearing everything that we've heard so far about the plans that everyone has in place. But what if a zebra kicks? What if a zebra bites? Communication for us was key in all of that. Making sure that our trainer who is at the head asking for the behaviors and offering those reinforcers, if they notice ear pinning, if they notice their head going down, if they notice a lot of tail swishing, is there a fly somewhere around that is just causing extra irritation that we can call out to our trimmer to make sure our trimmer is aware of what's going on, where they're focused in on getting the job done and getting that trim done, so that way we can move on to the next foot or the next zebra or whatever we need to do. So training was just really important. And again, just going back to making sure we understand what behaviors we're looking at when working with these individuals. So each one a little bit different. They all have different tells. They all have different likes and dislikes. So making sure that keepers are able to read and understand what all their behavior is. If behavior was being misread, we always made sure that we would offer someone to work with them a little bit more closely, get through those little bumps and get through the training set safely, and making sure communication is on point.
Like Kim said, we have moved to our zebra being in multiple yards. So this does make a lot of multiple species, but we wanted to make sure that this didn't reduce the amount of training. So we just added the amount of spaces that we could train these zebra in. So with the habitat rotation, we still wanted to make sure zebra could do their natural behaviors. When they were in rhino, they really didn't have the opportunity to graze. So being able to shift them into our train yard and into our veld area helps that. And then, like I said, we added additional training areas that we'll show a little later, so that we can still train them. The management allowed us a lot of leeway. We have really great management here. So we have a really good management team that lets us pull the zebra off habitat for like an hour or so to get those training sessions done, or send them out early or bring them in early. And this is something that has really helped us with those mixed species yards. We also have a yard that we can bring the animals in easily for like 30 minutes to get a set done and then shift them back out. We also do have a lot of spaces that the guests can see. So in our rhino habitat, that is a really good spot for our guests to come down. They can see from our boardwalk and see our training, as well as our train yard holding. Our train goes through there, and they have a really good focal point to see our training that gets done in there. So training, consistency, and time availability. Like we mentioned before, our management is amazing here. So they have really helped. So Kim, as well as our director, Lauren, have both gone to the ZHTP trimming course, and they always come down anytime we need help with training, looking at trimming for feet, all of that kind of stuff. So we realized that that's really helpful for us. Our curator of Africa is the same way as well. She always comes down whenever we need her. Zebra trainers, like Kim mentioned, are not all on the same training experience level. We actually have it now that every keeper that is in Africa becomes a zebra trainer. And we realize that this is super helpful to make sure that we are getting training sets done and trimming done, because we can pull a keeper at any point and it doesn't have to be a specific zebra trainer. So all of our keepers can train all of our zebra. And this is something that has worked really, really well with our team. Communication is super big. I noticed in the last presentation, you guys have a communication log. We have the same thing for each one of our individuals. We write down how the set went, who was sitting at the feet, how it went, did they participate really well. We also have a document that records all of our trimming as well. So what keeper trimmed, when they got trims. We have our zebra on a monthly rotation. So all of our zebra get trims every month, and we document this, which is super helpful. We still do a lot of video taking, as Kim said.
We love a good video.
We love doing, especially with our babies, which we'll get into a little later, but with our baby zebra, we did so many videos with them just because it was so exciting being able to have babies and training them for the first time. So we did a lot for successes and for breakthroughs as well. Another big thing for us is, like Kim mentioned, our training sets can be really long. So we do make sure that the whole team is acknowledged for the keepers who aren't even trimming or training, that are doing the husbandry off to the side. And this is something as a team that's really brought us together, because we can really say, like, acknowledge, like, thank you for cleaning this extra stall for me so that I could go and train the zebra. And then next time we do a training set, you can go train and then I'll go clean. And this is something that we found really helps a team like stay together and like have us positively work with these zebra. We also prioritize our training sets to understand the why it's so important. We really don't want to do any knockdowns on our zebra. So we really try to make sure that we prioritize those training sets and those trimmings. We've had to do some knockdowns in the past, but since I've been here, we've only had to do one, and I've been here for 2.5 years. So I find that amazing, and I would hope that we don't have to do any more. So.
And this is that video of Iggy that I mentioned earlier, our labeled flighty individual, that us at the end with her confidence and the way she grew through all this training and the way her behaviors changed was just such a pleasure to watch her just blossom into this confident zebra that no one thought she could be.
So these are a few of our training areas that we have. So this first picture over here is our rhino barn stalls. This is a good space because it does have some concrete in there. So we can have the zebra come up, put their foot on the block or the stand, and we don't have to clean their foot off in between them setting their foot back down. So this is a really nice spot. It has vertical bars that are about 6 inches or so apart. So trimmers can get in there and we can get a block in and out. The next space is the rhino hab, which Kim mentioned already. Our girls seem to do really well in there since they were trained in there first. So I personally noticed that when they're out there, they do not way better, but they like know it, like to go into that habitat. The next space is our bridge area. So this is once our zebra got moved back to our barn, we were like, we need spaces to be able to still train since they no longer have that rhino habitat. So this is a space that goes from their stalls in between when they get shifted into our train yard and out into our belt. And this space is basically set up the same as our rhino barn stall. So it has those vertical bars. And we have a big keeper space, so a trainer and a trimmer can safely be in this spot. And then the zebra can walk around. They can walk away if they need or come back. And then we have our train yard holding stall space. So this spot is normally we have doors that close. You can't see because Megan is trimming in this picture. But we have doors that are normally shut. And then when we do have a training session, we just open those doors up, have the zebra line up, trim those feet. The train does go through this yard and they can see when we're doing training sets. So that's really good with guests. It's kind of hard to see in that picture, but we also have a mat laid there. So like kind of the same as concrete. So we don't have to keep brushing off their feet. And then the last one is our guard stall, which Kim mentioned that we use. We use that for our male Bakari. We can train them in other spots, but this is where we first got trained. So we use this, we stand in our hoofstock stalls and then Bakari stands in our lane space where he gets shifted onto habitat and he lines right up. And we use the guard to protect ourselves from him. He's a really good zebra, so we don't have much to worry about. We also hopefully have more spaces. Like I said, we do have our velt that the zebra shift out into. They currently don't have a training space out there, but my dream is to make one out there so that we can train them out there as well on habitat. So like evolution, like Kim said, we did have the hook block and then it moved to the hoof stand. A lot of times now we just start off with the stand when we had the babies because we realized it was a lot easier than transitioning. We also have had a lot of zebra trainers become trimmers. So like I said, Kim's been to ZHTP. I have gone as well. I was able to go this February. And we've also, I believe, had 4 other keepers on our team that have also gone. And this has been really helpful because when we're trimmers, we know what it's like training the animal. So we can easily communicate with the trainers what we're seeing, what we need, where we need the animal to go. And we found this has been really helpful. We also have developed a hoof trim station in almost all of our habitats. And this has also been nice. So no matter where that zebra is for the day, we always have somewhere we can pull them in, train them, get a trim done. It's been super helpful. And then we've trained our moms with our babies, and then we've trained our babies, which is super exciting. So once our moms had their foals, we did wait a little bit for their bonding period. It depended on the mom, and we also talked to management to see when they were comfortable with us starting to trim or train. And when they said it was okay, we would actually start the training set without any trimmers. We would just have the mom come out and do a training set, line up, see how comfortable they were. Almost all of our moms went right back into it. It's like they didn't even miss a beat at all. We did monitor the babies a lot to see how they reacted. Our babies are also amazing, so they seem to be really confident and liked us. We do have a lot of choice and control still. And then once we did see that the moms were comfortable, we would introduce a trimmer. And then we would have so much communication between the trainer and the trimmer just to watch to see if the baby's acting okay, if the mom's getting agitated. We also noticed once the baby started eating grain that they would want to take grain from the person who was training their mom. So that would happen a lot. Like we said, we also found that the moms went really back or were fine with it. Here's a video of our zebra Lauren's full jersey nursing while he's trimming. So he was nursing and then came right over, looked to see what Lauren was doing, just checked her out and then walked away. We noticed that would happen a lot. They just were curious and wanted to see what was happening. And once they realized nothing crazy was happening, they're like, oh, this is fine. And we noticed that then when we started training our boys, it went really well. We started working on training our boys as soon as they were interested in food. So as soon as they would come up to us, actually when their moms were getting trimmed, we would start doing target sessions with them. So we could start like target training them while their mom was getting trimmed. And this is our timeline for our first baby that we ever had, Jersey. So he was born on June 1st. And then by January 3rd, we started doing target training with him. A little over a week later, we started doing hoof trim training. So just bring him in the chute, lining him up, having him asking for foot. And then we had a video taken of Lauren holding his foot. I believe this is like the first time, a little bit over a month later. Him asking for that foot. You can tell he's so nonchalant, really chill. Boys are he's not as much. Our other boy, Ziggy, is very tactile and does not care if we pick up their feet. And then after that video, we had our first hoof trim by March. And then I would say within like a month, we almost had all 4 feet trimmed after that. We realized that once they figured out 1 foot, they realized that the next was really easy. And I also believe that us training them with their moms also helped a lot to get them comfortable and confident. All right, so just to wrap up what we were talking about, we really realized that perfect training does not exist. We've had a lot of successes, but we've also had a lot of failures. We've had zebra like Iggy act like she doesn't know what she's doing for months, and then we realized that it was a joke. So we always want to make sure that that's not perfect. Like things are going to happen, so we just document everything and we try to be really flexible as a team. Always make sure we also use what you have. So as you can see, a lot of our spaces we are already existing. We didn't have to build anything, just the trainer holding. But a lot of that, we just saw what we had and we're like, hey, they think this would be a good spot to trim. So let's try it. Same with thinking out of the box. We're like, hey, this is the safe area. Can we try it? Luckily, our management's super understanding. They're like, yeah, go for it. And we do, and then it works. Prioritizing is something we also found is super helpful for maintaining our trimming and our training. Like I said, we trim every 4 weeks. So we always are like, hey, we need to get a trim done, and we make sure it happens. And we always train staying on top of it because we know how important it is. And then lastly, it takes a village. I think that's something that has made our program so successful, is that our whole entire team knows that this is really, really important. thing, not like for our zebras and for their health. So it takes a village to not only train, trim, but do all the other things that go on in the zoo as well. So I think that's it.
That's all we got. We really like our zebra. I don't know how much time we went over, but we really like our zebra.
Hi, sorry for that delay. So
That's
it looks
okay.
like we did run out of time for questions, but we do have them noted down and we will get them sent to you guys so that we can get answers and share them with everybody. But thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you, guys.
Great, thank you so much. And so then last, but clearly not least, is Christina from Disney. So here we go.
Sure. Can you guys see the full presentation and not just the PowerPoint slides?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, thank you guys so much for having me. Again, my name is Christina. I'm one of the animal keepers at Disney's Animal Kingdom, and I work on our East Savannah team, which is one of our mixed species African areas. So we have the lions, ostrich, warthogs, Grevy zebras, and many more. But I'm going to be talking to you guys today
Yes, it was hay.
our Grevy zebras and their training program, but with a specific focus on the building blocks to our voluntary hoof trims. I've been with Disney for 2 years now. So I started with Grevies when I started there. Currently, we do have 0.2 Grevies in our collection, but this presentation is really going to focus on our oldest mare, Laylee, and her care and training process. So before we get into the full presentation, I wanted to give you guys some historical knowledge on our training program as well as Laylee's background. So you guys have a little bit of a better understanding of why we made the decisions we did for her care. So Laylee is about 15 years old, and throughout her life, she has had chronic white line disease, separation, thin soles, you name it, she has had problems with her feet. Some of these concerns have been due to environmental factors from rainy weather. We all know it can be very wet in Florida. So that has had some factors with her feet, as well as the sandy substrate that she is currently housed on. We were not able to do voluntary trims when I first started with her. So she was actually on a scheduled immobilization about every 6 to 8 weeks just to maintain those concerns. On average, that was about 5 times a year. And with each immobilization, we were having to resect about 50% of her hooves walls just to, again, maintain that white line. In addition to that, looking back at some of her training history, originally when Laylee was trained, keepers took a very similar approach with other hoof stock, taking your hand down the leg just to stimulate a lift. But I found with Laylee that really wasn't a positive approach for her. She actually, with that approach, lost tactile throughout most of her body, and she was a very tactile zebra before that. So with that information, I wanted to ask myself, what is the solution to better her care? And breaking that down, that meant I was going to be looking at the least intrusive, but most effective behavioral management strategy with her. We wanted to also consider that every animal is different and every animal learns differently and is comfortable with different things as well. So breaking that down for Laylee meant that I was going to be training a voluntary trim for both front and backs using no tactile cues. So this is our training process for both front and backs. It was a very similar process for both, but we first started with desensitizing the blocks. I say blocks because we went through a lot of them, just trying to understand what she was most comfortable with. When we first started with the first block we introduced her to, we had it just outside the stall on that keeper side of that training wall. Again, just getting her used to seeing a visual barrier there, getting used to walking next to something. But once we started to see calm behaviors, her staying engaged with keepers, her not running from that, we then went ahead and we started to scoot it in closer and closer into the stall with her until we had it at a position that it would have been appropriate position for a trim. And again, each time we moved it an inch in, we were looking for those calm behaviors. So again, staying with the keepers, staying calm, and engaging in the sessions. The next step was approximating the lift. This step had a lot that went in it, not just the lift itself, but the first step was actually looking at that opposite foot that was remaining on the ground. We needed that to be placed in a very specific location for her, because if it wasn't in the specific location, she wasn't going to hold for the trim or wasn't going to be in the correct location to place her leg on that block. So what we did is we went ahead and I moved that block a little further out back towards the keepers again, just enough to get her to step 1 foot around there. Each time we stepped 1 foot around, just bridging and reinforcing and establishing that behavior. Once that was established, we went ahead and we pushed that block a little further in again, back to that appropriate location. And then from there, I actually introduced a cue, get ready. So the get ready behavior is just the behavior for her to step around the block and step 1 foot around. That behavior has actually been very helpful in other behaviors, especially with x-rays. She has actually transitioned that to understanding she takes 1 foot and steps it around. From there, once we had that get ready behavior established, we worked on the lift. So starting off with the lift, just getting her to slowly lean into the block, reinforcing her each time she's touching it, then moving forward, maybe getting the heel off the ground again, until we were having the cannon bone rest on that cushion portion of that block. Again, reinforcing each approximation throughout. From there, I then introduced the lift behavior. So it is lift is the cue. And that has actually also been very helpful in other behaviors, because we have found that the lift cue actually to her means I'm just lifting my leg. From there, we then desensitize touch. Through this process, I've actually been able to work with Laylee to reestablish that tactile throughout most of her body. So she does let us touch all around her face and the upper part of her body, but we still can't touch from shoulder down to her coronary band. But we're very lucky to be able to still touch her hoofs. So when we first started with the touch, we just started with a 2-finger touch, just to give her the sensation of there's something new on her hoof. From there, again, we were looking for the calm behavior and her not running or removing her foot from the block. Anytime that she pulled or she removed her foot, we just went ahead and we just reset her and we let her go. We wanted to create a very positive experience through this whole process. Each time we were able to move forward with that touch, we just slowly increased the amount of fingers that we had on there until we were able to grasp the foot fully with all of our full hand. From there, we then worked on the motion of the hoof. We wanted to stimulate a variety of different things that a trimmer would naturally do. So moving it up, holding her foot up, moving it back and forth, left and right, just any variation that we could come up with in that situation. We also worked on duration throughout this process as well too. Again, increasing the duration of that hold as well as the hold on the block. In addition to that, we also worked on different pressure, how tight we were holding her hoof versus how loose, again, giving as much variation. So if any trimmer stepped in, it's going to be different throughout, and she's used to that. The next step was response to the tools. So we currently use a variety of tools from knives, brushes, picks, rasps, nippers, as well as a variety of topical ointments that she may need. But we initially started with the brushes and the picks, again, just starting with a very simple sensation that we felt that that was going to be easiest to start off with. From there, we then worked through the different tools. Each time we introduced a new tool, we only introduced one at a time. So we never introduced 2 new tools in a session. At this point, she's able to use all 4 tools in whatever order we throw at her. So that's been a really big positive step. And last but not least, trims. So we currently trim her on a weekly basis. We have found that her hoofs grow incredibly fast. So we tend to split the trims between 2 days just due to training resources. So she usually gets her front feet trimmed on one day and her back feet trimmed on the next. And from there, we usually do a 6-minute trim on each foot. That seems to be the perfect amount of time for our trimmers and enough time to get everything that we need done. If we are introducing new trimmers, normally we do a split trim. So we'll do 3 minutes with the newer trainer and then the next 3 minutes with the more established trainer. Again, just getting them used to having it down there and then having that next trimmer come in and being able to clean up any aspects that may have been missed during getting them used to the new trimmer. So this is the front foot behavior, this video. I'm going to play it a few times just in case if the sound doesn't come through, but I'm going to walk through it with you guys as well. So again, we're asking for that get ready behavior, and then we go straight into the lift. Throughout this behavior, I'm using a intermittent bridge. Yes, we found once we introduced that intermittent bridge, she really did solidify, and that light bulb really switched on for her understanding she's holding through that whole process. Throughout, there's constant communication between the trainer and the trimmer, just knowing them telling me what is going on, what they're feeling down there, as well as what I'm seeing up top. Laylee tends to show a lot of factors in her face and her neck. So normally if she's going to break, I can usually see it in her face before the trimmers start to feel it. So just playing it one more time. So again, what we're looking for with that get ready is to be right next to that block, right in the middle. And then the lift is her cannon bone resting on those pool noodles. While I'm feeding, we have a bucket that's right in front of me. So for safety reasons, we can't feed through those metal bars. So we actually have been able to build a little feeding tub that sits right on front there. With this behavior as well too, we have found that a few other smaller behaviors has been incredibly helpful through this process. So line up behavior, just having her line up parallel to the wall, and then an over behavior, which is actually having her butt move in. The over behavior was a huge portion in the back foot trims, and that's been incredibly helpful as well. So this is the back foot behavior. Oh, sorry. Here we go. So again, very similar as the fronts. The cue for this is foot. And again, the criteria is I'm looking for her to be placing the toe on that black mat. This back foot does have some different variations in it. So sometimes she'll place the toe on it, but there's also a divot that you can see she's currently sitting in. We're very lucky with the back foot that she is a lot more desensed. So you can see that one of the other keepers is able to hold near her coronary band. So that has been very nice as well too. So again, with this behavior, I'm still using that yes intermittent bridge to continue to reinforce her throughout. At the end of the behavior, I do use a terminal whistle bridge, ending that behavior, and then she gets her final reinforcement once she's off the block. We found with her, she definitely can play the keepers a lot, so we added a lot of criteria and we're very strict with her. We found if we gave that final reinforcement before she was off the block, she tended to kind of leave and come whenever she wanted to instead of listening to that final cue. Again, through this back foot behavior as well too, since I've been able to work back up to the tactile again, giving her tactile and rubbing her down through this trim also has really helped to solidify her and make her a little more comfortable on that block as well and get her a little more stable. So this is some before and afters. The first pictures were actually taken in January of this year. And that was a foot that we really just weren't working on very much. She was on the block, but really couldn't do much other than brush. The after is that same foot about a week ago. So we were actually able to trim all 4 feet at this point, like I said. But some pros that we have really found through this process have been that we have had to not have to immobilize her at all. So she is now on immobilizations just for emergencies only. So that has been a huge plus for her welfare and her care. In addition to that, we've seen a drastic growth in her trust for keepers, as well as her training capabilities. Through this whole process, the first time we introduced the block, that first foot definitely took a good bit of time to get her used to that behavior. But each time we've introduced the next block to the next foot, she has moved through it continuously quicker. She also picks up on new behaviors much quicker. We're working on x-rays as well. So all of those very dynamic and difficult behaviors, she's learning much quicker. Some challenges though that we still face to this day is we still cannot touch the coronary band on the front legs. She is significantly more sensitive on those fronts, so we do have to be a lot more careful, but it is really nice that on the backs that she is more desensitized on the backs. Some other challenges we face too is noises. She's very sensitive to different noises. We've been able to work her through the different noises from different rasping sounds as well as the nippers, but through this process, she had a lot of sensitivities to the nipper sounds especially, but we found if we talked her through it, as well as giving her that tactile on her shoulder, it really calmed her down. And then finally, finding the perfect fit. So finding the perfect fit for the block. Again, we wanted to take into consideration that Laylee is her own individual and that her block is going to be very different from what other animals may use. So this was the progression of the blocks. There was a lot of steps of us trying to figure this out. We actually started with one of our rhino blocks just to kind of see the shape and to see if that shape worked. From there and determining we did like the shape of the block, we then increased the height to an appropriate height for Laylee. And then we found out at the end of this that Laylee can be a little bit of a diva and she likes her comfort. So we added those pool noodles in to just really make it a little squishier. She seemed to solidify a lot more. Through this process, we did find that if she could pair a different portion of her leg touching an area, she picked up on the behavior a lot quicker. So that was the reasoning for her placing her cannon bone on the top of that block to then have the toe hang off. The back block definitely had a lot more steps that we were trying to figure this out. I wanted to take the information that we found from the fronts from her understanding that she needs to rest a different portion of her area to use that in the back. So the initial idea was for her to take a step forward, and as she's taking a step forward, to rest the pastern of her leg on a block to extend her leg out. She said no thank you to that and preferred to toe tap the block. But we tried for a while to get her to rest a different portion of her leg on the block. She also showed us that she preferred to be a lot higher up versus the lower blocks that we tried. She sat a lot more stable. So our final block, we ended up just going, we took the ramp out and it ended up just going with the toe tap. So from there, the criteria again is that she toe taps the top of that block, she rests there for a second, and then the trimmers will manipulate into the position that they need. So again, that block has a divot that she can rest her foot in so her toe hangs out, or if they need to work a little higher up, they can just leave it on top of that block as well. So some future goals that we're currently working on with our girls, specifically Laylee, is some x-ray for all 4 feet. In this image, it's just one of the setups that we're using. So this is going to be x-ray from over the top with her, but we're also working on some x-rays that will go in between their legs as well. But in addition to that, she is also learning a hand injection behavior for any immobilizations or vaccines, so we don't have to dart her. But overall, we've learned a lot from this whole process. We've really been able to, again, grow her trust and her training capabilities, which has been so helpful for so many behaviors. She has been able to desense so quickly to new things, which has been so nice because we throw a lot of things at her on a daily basis. And again, with these weekly hoof trims, in addition to we do medical foot baths as well with her, we've seen a huge decrease in the white line, as well as we haven't had to immobilize her, which has been huge. Overall, it has just been a huge growth in her process as well and her welfare. So thank you guys so much for having me. And thank you to everybody on my team that has been a huge supporter of this as well too. Any questions? Just quick and short.
Thank you. We've had 2 questions, and I know you covered this in the presentation, but I didn't know if you'd want to give a little bit more information. What is your intermittent bridge versus terminal bridge?
So the intermittent bridge, again, is just to continuously let her know that she's on the right track. So it's yes. And again, we are giving a primary reinforcement as I'm giving that yes bridge as well too. And then the terminal bridge is to end the behavior. We found that she needed a lot more clarification of like, we're still going, keep your foot up on there, still keep it up there. We did have, just that, like, and we did have a reinforcement throughout the behavior, but that verbal seemed to really help click. And then she loves to sample behaviors. So we really had to establish like the terminal bridge means we are done. We are moving on to the next thing, or you will do the behavior when you are asked again for it. She is notorious for offering many things at a time.
And a follow-up to that, do you feed continuously or after the intermittent bridge or only after the terminal bridge?
So I am feeding again when we're using that intermittent bridge. So it's usually about every 5 to 10 seconds, kind of depending on her behavior. And that is continuous throughout that trim as well. And then she does get a primary reinforcement, which is usually her most reinforcing thing at the end. So reinforcements that we use ranges from a lot of different things, from carrots and sweet potatoes on a daily basis. We also use her 5-ZOX grain as well. So that tub has been very helpful with that. But probably the biggest reinforcement for all of our zebras is barley grass. That is, we are able to do a lot of stuff with that barley grass. It is very nice.
Awesome. And then what were the steps for training the over behavior that you mentioned?
So building back up that tactile, she does like to offer her butt a lot. So we would actually do a butt smack. And it was good capture behavior as well too, but just again, getting that tactile where we kind of smacked her butt, took a step in, and then slowly approximated it in. So with that over behavior, the criteria is that she has to push all the way into the wall that's there. And that's when we accept it. So again, just taking the approximations of slowly stepping in until she was touching that wall.
And that was all the questions we got in. So thank you so much. Is Kimberly still on?
Yes.
Since we have about 9 minutes left, we were going to see if you guys would be able to answer some of the questions that came in for you guys.
Yeah, so my co-presenter Morgan had to leave, but I'm happy to answer anything.
Just let me go back to, okay. What reinforcers did you use? I think, was that possibly hay in one of the pictures?
It sure was. When we were initially trying, because Iggy was our most challenging training case that we had, we tried everything, whatever she found reinforcing at that time, that was an approved diet item for her to have. So there are certain points of time where that Timothy hay just was nice and green and looked really good, and they just loved it. So we would utilize that as a way that we would reinforce as well. We will use their diet grain, ADF16. We will use carrots. We use those Knicker treats, which is an apple horse treat brand. We use hay. At one point we were using a little bit of alfalfa for just a higher value reinforcer. So those are just kind of some of the things that we use. And in that initial training, that was one of the first few times we had gotten Iggy to hold duration. We had found that she didn't actually know how to do a continuous behavior. She would just do the behavior and that was it. So learning that continuous thing took some time, and hay actually helped with that. So the longer time it took her to chew the hay versus just a quick carrot, we found actually helped make the connection for that continuous behavior.
Awesome.
So would use lettuce sometimes.
All the things. How did you manage animal behavior if there's any aggression between animals you're trying to train and others on the habitat, like if it's the multi-species setup?
Yeah, so we didn't run into so much aggression. We ran more into multiple animals wanted to train with us all at the same time. So with our zebras specifically, just about the herd that we had when we were training initially, our 3 females, there were times where we would train all 3 on habitat, but only one would be at the hoof trim station. So either we would just have keepers with individuals and just work on other behaviors with them, target, head up, open, anything like that, and just give them their own focus, which tend to help. Other things that we would do is shift. So they would shift into a barn stall if they were comfortable doing that. And there were times where they just didn't want to shift, but they didn't want to be around our training either, and would just kind of walk away. So we have a lot of different scenarios based on what habitat that they're in. displacement would be a thing. Rhinos would walk over and would literally just line up right in our hoof trim area, kick the zebra out, and just wanted to be rubbed. So then we'd have to get food, reline the rhinos back up. We didn't run into so much aggression. Everything was just mitigated through keeper attention or just shifting them and making sure that they were calm and comfortable being away. Oh, you are muted.
Sorry, yes. Do you have multiple trainers or just one trainer involved at the beginning of teaching an animal a completely new behavior?
Multiple. We are for sure against the grain on this. Again, consistency is really important. So we have multiple trainers for new behaviors, and then that also gets dispersed to more individuals after that behavior is established. Each individual is slightly different. If we find some work a little bit better for others, we might monopolize on that a little bit. However, our zebra are really acclimated. Our Africa team is a team of 17 individuals. We have some people primarily work on it, but because the zebra go everywhere and they're around all keepers at all point, because they go through the rotating habitats, sometimes it just depends on where they are. Keepers are able to work with them through the new behaviors. Sometimes we might have an established team, but for the most part, everyone trains them.
I have a follow-up question. How do you keep it consistent between trainers?
Yeah, so consistency is hard, and I'm not going to tell you it's perfect, because by no means is it, which is kind of where we rely on the phrase, like, perfect training doesn't exist. Like, sometimes there's setbacks, and sometimes people maybe don't have the right positioning, so they're having a lot of difficulty getting that individual to line up correctly in order to accomplish the behavior, which then tends to lead to frustration from the animal of, hey, I don't understand, I'm doing this. So there's just a lot of teamwork. It's a big group effort. A lot of times keepers will call me and say, hey, can you come watch my training? I'm having difficulty with this. We'll come over, we'll watch. And just having those second set of eyes, we always try to have second set of eyes, because it does help with, hey, try this, move your body this way, take one step forward, take one step backward. So we mitigate it all through just communication. Our training logs are incredibly detailed. We find it the best way to help communicate through that. We do take a lot of video. I find video the most helpful thing. I video trainers while they're training and show them, this is what you're doing, or also help step in and say, this is what I need you to do instead of what you were doing before. This is what the animal is looking for, how to be more in control of the training environment to allow better success through the training. So it is just a lot of communication, a lot of pairing up, and we're all very open. There is no ego for it. Hey, I'm having difficulty, can someone come watch me?
Awesome, thank you. And then actually our last question that came in for you guys, do all trainers train established and in progress behaviors?
Yes and no. So like I said, there are some individuals who may be on a specific team, but there is no one person who only has one new behavior. It is always a group of individuals who might be on, say Ziggy, one of our 1-year-old boys. He has a primary trainer of 4 individuals, again, to make sure that we kind of work through vacations, we work through weekends. There's always somebody there who is able to step in and train him. If something happens, we notice a crack in the hoof wall, we need to make sure that we address it with the trim. We always have someone able and comfortable with him specifically as an individual, but also there is a little bit of an expectation that anyone can step in. There's not ownership to the point where like nobody else can work with that individual. If that answers that question.
I believe so. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And that was all the questions that came in. I don't believe I missed any, but I'm sorry if I did. I'll go back and check. But thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everyone for presenting and for attending, and hopefully technology will be in my favor and we'll be able to send out the recording to everyone who, so you guys can share it for those that could not attend it today. So have a great day, everyone. Bye.